Wow, how do you follow that? My name is Mark Malan. I'm a board-certified clinical sexologist and author of scientific research on the history of sexual attitudes in Mormon culture. Some of you know my work. My doctorate is in sexual science. One of my specialties is researching and treating psychosexual shame. My wife, Colette, is a psychotherapist and a certified sex therapist. I'm here today to speak as a scientist. I'm interested in the scientific data that many of you have provided in the form of personal subjective accounts of your experiences in LDS priesthood interviews. These are your stories of your church experience. These are your testimonies. So, what does this data tell us as scientists? In general, it's telling us that there are two major types of sexual abuse that were a result of priesthood interviews, one-on-one with children behind closed doors. The first type is hands-on physical sexual abuse. I call this type overt sexual abuse. The second type is psychological sexual abuse, and I call this type of sexual abuse covert sexual abuse. The physical sexual abuse in your stories come from leaders with untreated pedophilia. Some priesthood leaders clearly are pedophiles. There's ample evidence. Some have been prosecuted. The majority are not pedophiles. However, the problem is that these pedophiles are wolves in sheep's clothing. They appear on the outside to be harmless and trustworthy. They're only discovered after harm has been done and their victims gain enough courage to report them to the authorities. Can a pedophile victimize a child if they're not alone with them? Would ending one-on-one interviews behind closed doors significantly protect our children? The answer is obvious. Today, by marching, we are asking this to stop. Now, let's look at the second type of sexual abuse you reported in your testimonial stories, the psychological sexual abuse, your data. There are far more examples of this type in the data. It's a very serious problem. It stems from well-meaning advice and counsel from untrained leaders that is unintentionally shaming. In the very worst cases, though, the shaming is intentional. Terrifying children about their sexual feelings causes them to disassociate or hate themselves. This is a formula for disaster. Elizabeth Smart, who was kidnapped right here in Salt Lake City, raped and held captive for nearly a year, spoke at Johns Hopkins University. Elizabeth explained that during a morality object lesson, premarital sex was compared to being like a chewed up piece of gum. I'll never forget how I felt lying there on the ground, she said. How could anyone ever love or care for me after this? I thought, oh my gosh, I'm that chewed piece of gum. Nobody rechews a piece of gum. you throw it away. And that's how easy it is to feel like you no longer have any worth. Why would it even be worth screaming out? Why would it make a difference if you were rescued? Your life still has no value. No value. Psychosexual abuse is covert and often unintentional. This makes it very, very pernicious. Psychosexual abuse is like a house infected with termites that eat away at its integrity unnoticed until one day the walls just completely collapse. Nobody on the outside notices until the damage is done. Kip Eliason was a 16-year-old LDS boy who killed himself. You know, I can't give these talks without getting choked up. He killed himself simply over the shame of sexually touching his own body. Kip was an active church member, a 4.0 student, a track team athlete, and he already had earned his eagle. Kip strove for excellence. During his priesthood interviews, his bishop told him arousing sexual feelings for his own body was a sin next to murder, and that he needed to be abstinent. He told him that made him unworthy before God. Church pamphlets on morality said so. Kip tried really hard to stop. His detailed diary shows Herculean efforts and many, many bishop meetings asking help on how to change. He believed he was a failure and unworthy. Kip's sense of worthlessness took him to the depths of depression and hopelessness. Kip committed suicide. If Kip's untrained bishop had not asked sexual questions, would Kip be alive today? This is why we are marching today. Stop asking children sexual questions. In Kip's young mind, failure was not an option. Today, as scientists, we know a lot more about sexuality. Testosterone is the hormone that creates sexual desire. Boys usually have about 20 times more than girls, but girls' levels peak during their cycle. Athletic boys like Kip have high testosterone levels. Sexual feelings can become very pronounced. Abstinence seems impossible. Today, sexual scientists can look into the brain with brain scans. Neuroscientists know that the brain is not fully developed until we reach into our mid-20s. Judgment and perspective are not yet in place. Some kids have ADD or OCD, a football concussion, or even falling out of your high chair when you're 3 can damage your brain and alter how you think. Adolescents are especially vulnerable during this life stage as they are going through puberty and struggling to form a healthy new identity. Emerging sexual feelings usually feel awkward and unfamiliar. Remember? Yeah. These feelings need to be accepted and acknowledged as a part of healthy development towards adulthood and functional relationships, and not shamed. Kip was too young to make sense of what was happening to him. His trusted counselors had the best of intentions. They failed. They failed. Bishops can't measure testosterone levels or do brain scans. They're not trained in psychotherapy to diagnose or treat mental health conditions in young people or even adults. Children must not be psychosexually shamed in interviews with trusted church leaders. Telling kids with high testosterone and an immature brain that touching their own bodies is a sexual sin next to murder is a formula for suicide. We must stop doing that. Shame kills kids. I wish I had time to tell you about the thousands of couples, individuals, and children that have been in our clinic and told us about the shame that they felt as a result of the teachings about sexuality that come from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Much sexual dysfunction has been a result. So in conclusion, I thank you. I thank you for all your brave stories, for bringing this data to light. Your published testimonies are feedback church leaders need to move forward with better policies. We are about to march to present our testimonies to the leadership. The evidence is clear. Serious harm is being done. There is no debate. Shame is not defensible. The church and Protect LDS Children both want to protect children. Protecting children from harm is our common ground. Science and religion can work together. Love is the answer. Right, Dave? Our march today is a march of love for all children. Ending one-on-one interviews and sexual questioning of children will save lives. Working together for positive change is what we're all here for today. Thank you.